Hello, everyone. Welcome back to New Polity's podcast. I'm here to discuss the book of Esther with Maria Brandel. Maria, thanks.
Hi.
It's like we haven't left the studio that we last recorded in. I don't know why. Maria is going to be at this marvelous event that we're throwing, our annual New Polity conference, Man, Woman, Tyrant, Slave. It's at the end of May, and you can buy tickets right now. newpolity.com/events. You get to see Maria, you get to see myself, and you get to contemplate the torturous mystery of man and woman. Sorry. Anyways, Esther is what we're about today, and we have been, up to this point, reading through the book and basically trying to discern, just enjoy Esther, appreciate it, but also trying to discern the deeper meaning of the text, and especially how it shows a sort of archetypical how it makes a sort of comment on the archetypical vocation of the woman and also the man, such that we hope it can be of some fruit to your life. I know it's a far-reaching and lofty goal, but we like to think that the podcast to being helpful thing is possible. So here we go.
Podcasts can be useful.
I believe it. I believe it. So we last left off in this marvelous comic story that's also a story of it's kind of like a thriller, and it has a certain almost like there's sort of a trashy romance thing going on here as well. It's got a lot of great genres to it. But we discussed Esther as this sort of like sleeper cell of the law entering into the mechanical world of harem, by which man appears as God. And he appears as God by arranging his world in such a way that the alarming quality of sexual difference never really appears. The other is never really allowed to appear before the king. It's always pre-planned. It's always mediated. The king is surrounded by these layers that you have to literally conform to his law in order to enter into his presence. And by that time, he knows exactly what to expect. And so the marvelous surprise of the woman is sort of from the beginning guarded against, and this produces a sphere in which man, namely the king, relative to woman, appears to be some different kind of creature, a divine creature who isn't stricken by any kind of weakness or self-insufficiency. It's about where we arrived, and we are here at this is
chapter 4.
Chapter 4, and yeah, so let's just take it away.
Yep, so Mordecai has just refused to bow down to Haman, and then the plot against the Jews unfolds. And then, when Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, wailing with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, wherever the king's command and his decree came, there was a great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and most of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's maids and her eunuchs came and told her, the queen was deeply distressed. She sent garments to clothe Mordecai so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. Hathach went to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her and charge her to go to the king to make supplication to him and entreat him for her people, remembering the days of your lowliness when you were cared for by me, because Haman, who is next to the king, spoke against us for our destruction. Beseech the Lord and speak to the king concerning us and deliver us from death. Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a message from Mordecai, saying, All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law. All alike are to be put to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter that he might live. And I have not been called to come into the king these 30 days. And they told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told them to return answer to Esther, "Think not that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silence at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from some other quarter, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night nor day. I and my maids will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther ordered him.
Awesome. And I think this is the part of Esther that we all kind of remember most, is this like crisis of you have to go into the inner court of the king, but it's been devised in such a way, it's almost mysterious, like you're just not allowed to just show up on him. Mm-hmm. And so there's this threat of death. Now in the Esther Rabbah, the Jewish commentary here, it's also called the court of the idols. So they're very direct that this is like the place of like an almost temple-like interior divinity. This is where the illusion is most fully produced. And I just wanted to point out one thing that struck me. I've never thought about this reading, but there's like this, maybe it seems unimportant, but Esther is accustomed to Mordecai speaking with her, right? So she's within this harem, but then he would come to a certain area and would check on her, right? But he is now in mourning. And because he's in mourning, he's in sackcloth. And because he's in sackcloth, he is no longer allowed. There's a law saying he's not allowed to enter into the king's court. And this doesn't get discussed much, but it makes me think that the king, it kind of furthers this idea of the king's sort of divine illusion world, mm-hmm. where it's like nothing bad happens here. I don't know. It's like there's no mourning, there's no weakness, there's no sign of death. Like this is different, and so there's a ban. But that also means that now Mordecai can no longer speak directly to Esther. So they're both, by virtue of this great evil, separated further from each other, and kind of forced down into the mechanism. So now they need a eunuch to converse. And you see what Esther does at first. She tries to give him clothes to replace his sackcloth, but she's not saying like, stop mourning or something like mm-hmm. that. She's saying, I want to see you. And he refuses. And so the crisis is heightened, but what I think is dramatically cool is that their separation and their integration into the pagan regime is heightened. It's like now they communicate, male and female, through a eunuch who passes these messages back and forth.
But one other interesting thing about this chapter is the way in which the solution is suggested. I think in a quicker reading of the text, you could see that like Mordecai is asking Esther to speak to the king on behalf of her people, and then Esther is scared and she sends a message back saying like, I will probably be killed. I'm not sure I really like this idea, but I'm not exactly sure if that's what is happening. Just because like why could she not have sent a message to the king through a eunuch?
Right.
Why is it that she immediately talks about, well, if I go in person, I will die? And I don't think that's exactly what Mordecai means. Maybe it makes sense for her to interpret it that way.
Well,
but
all he says is beseech the Lord and speak to the king concerning us.
So, yeah, like that could mean like go send a message to the king and then just like ask on our behalf because you have this power. So one way of reading the text is that Esther is the one who's suggesting that she go before the king herself in this manner in which she will possibly die. And then Mordecai is kind of like bolstering her courage in this situation.
No, but that's really worth thinking. It's obviously the case that communication through eunuch is the norm, actually. So, especially given that she's the queen. I mean, if you look at the way Vashti and the king passed messages through eunuchs back and forth, it doesn't seem that seems possible. So the question is, I guess, to you, why? Like, why does she immediately say, no, like, to do this, I have to go see him, and then that is the risk of breaking the law and killing him, or being, sorry, Judith, get Judith on the brain. Esther risks being killed. Yeah,
well, one of the reasons I was, I guess, more attentive to that in the passage is because I was trying to figure out what is the difference between Esther and Vashti, because both of them seem to be undertaking actions that undermine the king in some way. So Esther is suggesting that she like literally break the law by entering uncalled for, and Vashti is also disobeying the king's direct request. So what exactly makes them different, their actions different? I think one difference between them is that like Esther is not like breaking the law through a mediated fashion. She's immediately putting herself on the line in the suggestion of going to the king directly, whereas with Vashti, she's still operating with the distance of a bureaucracy. She's still distancing herself from the king, and I mean, maybe she doesn't really have a choice in this situation. But I just think it's interesting to contrast the two of them.
Yeah, Esther immediately jumps to it. She has to show up, and she has to show up in person, and that's where she comes in conflict with the law designed precisely to keep any of the surprise of the particular person away from the presence of the king, in order to keep that, I think, illusion of divinity. But then they go and they pray. So Mordecai prays and Esther prays, and they go to begin this great dramatic encounter. And I think it helps us to understand the significance of the encounter way more if we look at the prayers. So I'll read Mordecai's and read Esther's.
And these are chapters 13 and 14. So these are both Greek editions, if it's an edition.
Okay. Mordecai's prayer. Then Mordecai prayed to the Lord and said, O God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, blessed are you. O Lord, Lord, King who rule over all things, for the universe is in your power, and there is no one who can oppose you if it is your will to save Israel. For you have made heaven and earth and every wonderful thing under heaven, and you are Lord of all, and there is no one who can resist you. You know all things. You know, O Lord, that I would have been willing to kiss the soles of Haman's feet to save Israel, but I did not do this, lest I set the glory of man above the glory of God. I will not bow down to anyone but you, O Lord my God. And now, O Lord God and King, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, spare your people, for the eyes of our foes are upon us to annihilate us, and they desire to destroy your inheritance. Do not neglect your portion which you redeemed for yourself out of the land of Egypt. Hear my prayer, and have mercy upon your inheritance. Turn our mourning into feasting, that we may live and sing to praise your name, O Lord. Do not destroy the mouth of those who praise you. And all Israel cried out mightily, for their death was before their eyes.
And Esther the queen, seized with deathly anxiety, fled to the Lord. She took off her splendid apparel and put on garments of distress and mourning. And instead of costly perfumes, she covered her head with ashes and dung. And she utterly humbled her body, and every part that she loved to adorn, she covered with her tangled hair. And she lay on the earth, together with all her maidservants, from morning until evening, and said, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob, blessed are you. Help me, who am alone and have no helper but you, for my danger is in my hand. Ever since I was born, I have heard in the tribe of my family that you, O Lord, took Israel out of all the nations, and our fathers from among all their ancestors, for an everlasting inheritance, and that you did for them all that you promised. And now we have sinned before you, and you have given us into the hands of our enemies, because we glorified their gods. You are righteous, O Lord, and now they are not satisfied that we are in bitter slavery, but they have covenanted with their idols to abolish what your mouth has ordained, and to destroy your inheritance, to stop the mouths of those who praise you, and to quench your altar and the glory of your house, to open the mouths of the nations for the praise of vain idols, and to magnify forever a mortal king. O Lord, do not surrender your scepter to what has no being, and do not let them mock at our downfall, but turn their plan against themselves, and make an example of the man who began this against us. I have heard from the books of my ancestors that you liberate all those who are pleasing to you, O Lord, until the very end. And now assist me, who am all alone, and have no one but you, O Lord my God. Come to my aid, for I am an orphan. Remember, O Lord, make yourself known in this time of our affliction, and give me courage, O King of the gods and Master of all dominion. Put eloquent speech in my mouth before the lion, and turn his heart to hate the man who is fighting against us, so that there may be an end of him and those who agree with him. But save us from the hand of our enemies. Turn our mourning into gladness and our affliction into well-being. You have knowledge of all things, and you know that I hate the splendor of the wicked and abhor the bed of the uncircumcised and of any alien. You know my necessity, that I abhor the sign of my proud position, which is upon my head on the days when I appear in public. I abhor it like a menstruous rag, and I do not wear it on the days when I am at leisure. And your servant has not eaten at Haman's table, and I have not honored the king's feast, or drunk the wine of libations. Your servant has had no joy since the day that I was brought here until now, except in you, O Lord God of Abraham. O God, whose might is over all, hear the voice of the despairing, and save us from the hands of evildoers, and save me from my fear.
Awesome. I love that prayer. That's a wonderful prayer.
It's great.
Everyone should pray that, if only to be able to abhor things so strongly. Yeah, it's phenomenal. So, look, I think you can tell I'm kind of nervous about some of these conclusions, but it seems to me like, again, with Israel having their death before their eyes and then being given a man's prayer for salvation, then a woman's prayer for salvation, it's appropriate to ask, what is male about the male prayer? What is female about the female prayer? And, because there's so much, especially in Esther's prayer, that is very important for like the analysis of the whole narrative. But just to kind of maybe focus on the male-female aspect here, a lot of their prayers are the same. They open it in the exact same manner, and very traditionally. There's a similar question of the mouth, where the desire is for the mouth that praises, not to be stopped up by being killed, obviously, and then the mouth of the wicked to be shut. So there's this that's happening in both prayers. But Mordecai's prayer, immediately, the first thing he says after he begins is to almost just abase himself before the sovereignty of God. The first thing he says is that there is no one who can oppose you if it's your will to save Israel. So the prayer to God is self-abnegating. It's not pointing to his own worthiness or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It's pointing immediately that God can do what he wants. That's
right. And then also it's a much more humble prayer. He's like the exact opposite of the king. You know that I would have been willing to kiss the soles of Haman's feet to save Israel. Mm-hmm. So he's not interested in making himself out to be a god. He fully acknowledges the Lord God as the God of the universe and the God of all kings.
And if you look at Esther's, and we should go back to her, what she does before she starts praying, but it's I think fitting that she, her first words after she begins is to speak, as it were, from herself. So his first words are, "You, Lord," and her first words are, "Help me, who am alone and have no helper but you, for my danger is in my hand." And I think there's something just phenomenal about this, because both are really in a similar position of humility, but the woman very clearly points to the power and sovereignty of God insofar as she sees it through her own orphan status, her own status as one who is helped by the Lord. And so she has this kind of like this getting to God through her own weakness, through acknowledging her own weakness. Whereas the man, it's not the same. Like, he gets to the sovereignty of God through history, basically. Like, the first thing he says is, you can do what you want. You made heaven and earth. No one can resist you. And so it has this very similar thing, but it's like they're coming at the same conclusion from different answers. One says, I look within, I find I am so weak. I need the help of the Lord. The other one, it's like, I look at the help of the Lord, which is so vastly strong, and then he comes to the conclusion that he is nothing. That he
So they both come to this position of humility before the Lord of all lords.
Yeah.
Kind of like an exact opposite to what's happening in the Persian court. And I also love that Esther takes off of her splendid apparel, and then utterly humbles her body, and every part that she loved to adorn, she covered with her tangled hair. Like taking off like the sign of her being queen and being associated with this godly character, and like abasing herself in a very physical manifestation. And
very notably, with the dung starting to smell unlike every other concubine, right? So like she is powerfully inverting the whole regimen of homogeneous production of brides. Like, they go 12 months of oil with 6 months for this smell, 6 months for that smell, and they come out when they're called to the king. And now she's covered in feces now. I mean, we have to kind of take this for what it means. Like, everything about the ordering of women, the control of their bodies, is being just ripped up, undone. And she's doing it with her maids, and she's fasting in the midst of this, so that she's willingly undergoing a sort of suffering in advance of Israel. Like, she is being Mother Israel in a certain way, and almost like making her own body a display of the horror that her nation will experience to evoke pity from the Lord. And we do this, right? We do this in a way, we know that our bodies are symbols, but we act like it, even when we kind of might deny it theoretically. It's like we turn our bodies into symbols of reality. If we're ashamed, we cover our faces and we shrink down, and we make our bodies into something that doesn't want to be as it's being seen.
Small and hides.
And so, but there's a real, like, when you move that from just like just a rote fact of human life to the fact of man's religious being, you realize that your body is a source of prayer. Like, you are able to symbolize the reality of your situation as a sort of offering to God. Like, it's religious consciousness, so it's hard to say. I'm not saying that God doesn't know what's going on and really needs you to look bad, but like, for the person to make themselves a sign of a abandoned and decimated and lonely Israel, in order to ask God to save Israel, I think makes just perfect sense.
I also think it's interesting in this passage, or in her prayer, you get an insight into her own character that's only been hinted about earlier. Because again, is this really a story of Esther being the prettiest of all the women? Or is there something about her character that gets the attention of the eunuch who's in charge? And it seems like that there is something about her character that might have elicited that response from him. You can also see that, like, secretly, like, she abhors the sign of her position, that she's not exactly happy about being queen, because it's a sign of a different kingdom that she's associated with, and not the law, and not with her people.
Yeah, she calls it her necessity. And then, that abhorring it like a menstruous rag is not, I mean, obviously it's just this awesome, strong metaphor, but it's also menstruation in the law is the source of women's ritual impurity, right? So they have to go through menstruation. They can't be touched. Things they touch become impure. They have to go through a ritual baptism or bath in order to become, pure again, or to become clean. And so when she's saying that the way she abhors this contact with the king and with the pagan regime is like that. I mean, she's speaking about being made unclean,
unfit for worship.
Yeah, like being apart from. And what's cool though is that she almost makes it as an argument, because she says, "Look, I'm unclean, but like how much I hate it." And so again, it's the woman who turns to the interior. She doesn't just like make some kind of casuistic. Is that how you say that word? She doesn't make an argument about the law. She doesn't say like, "Look, I have to sleep with the king. I have to do this, that, or the other." She points to her hatred. She says, "I in my inner being, like, I reject it. Mm-hmm. I'm under necessity." Mm-hmm. And I love that, because that's just such a female. It can drive you nuts as a thing about women, generally speaking, that they like that their determination of like their interior towards reality is way stronger, or like it's I don't know what the word is here.
Stubborn.
Yeah, it's like that is what determines the truth of the situation, which of course can have a vicious counterpart.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because this is a place in which the Persian bureaucracy can't reach into her interior self. Like, she might be exteriorly a part of this system and look like a majestic and regal queen, but interiorly she's still loyal to a different loyalty. Yeah. Which she holds very strongly, and that's the cause of the downfall. Yeah, it's
awesome. Do you derive like wisdom of how to be a woman you're wrapped up in a pagan regime yourself. I mean, let's be honest, we're not just talking about Persia here. It just seems like it's such a, how do I put it? Maybe if I speak it in a simple way, it'll be clear. It's like women they largely are like attractive, and they have like they're very beautiful, so when you're so you draw people to yourselves in a way that men don't really, not just by showing up, as it were. Men have to kind of prove something and then like get people into their corner. Women often are able
they just win.
Yeah. So, but it seems like that it's like Esther is aware of this, and she is. It's like you can imagine her as this vessel that holds the law inside of herself, and it matters just how and where she just shows up, because she's drawing people to herself, because they see her beauty, because they see who she is. But when they come in contact with her, they don't come in contact with just Esther, but they actually come in contact with God. Mm-hmm. And so it's like she's a trick in some way.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think it's interesting that her maidservants start supposedly doing this with her. It's not clear to me if they're just around her or if they're also engaging. Well, she's laying on the earth with her maidservants praying. So they might not go to the same extremes that she's going to, but now these other women who are a part of the Persian court are engaging in this prayer with her. Something I also find interesting is that, like, again, she's a complicated figure for, I guess, purity laws, because she's not really in a marriage situation, and it is with a foreigner who has not become a Jew. And yet there's something, I think the text is kind of asking you to see Esther as a pure figure. Yeah. So even though she's surrounded by impurity that she has no control over, something within her interior self is still obedient and faithful and loyal to the law. and pure, even if she can't manifest it in her exterior reality.
Yeah, and her name gets translated, not Esther, but the other one, her Hadassah, as myrtle. And then the description in Esther Rabbah is that it's because the myrtle has a fragrant scent, but is bitter to the taste, which I just take as true because I don't have a lot of relationship to myrtles. But yeah, so you can see even in her name there, you have this this twofoldness, that there's like a beauty and a pleasantness and a sweetness that seems to just emanate out, right? But then she's holding something that would be bitter to the same person that enjoyed, just the kind of exterior smell. And I think that in a way, I think it's the law of God that she's holding, and not just in a, crude way of like she happens to obey these laws, but in the sense of it's like God puts into her a law that would otherwise not appear as sweet. Like it would not appear pleasant to, I presume, the Persian Empire to have its whole logic undone, or to have its whole its whole dream of divinity crushed. So there's a way in which Esther, I think, is like a light to the nation. She's fulfilling the kind of primordial promise of Israel that they will be a light to the nations, not as the nations would hope for them to be a light, right? But as God wants them to be converted. So she is in her prayer. You pointed out that she asks for eloquent speech.
Well, maybe we should read
of God. Yeah, so just keep that in mind. I'll read the next part, and we can keep that in mind. On the third day, it's beautiful. In the Esther Rabbah, the fact of Israel's deliverance sort of happening on the third day, they say they say, on the third day is the revival of the dead, as it is written, he will revive us after 2 days. On the third, he will lift us. Hosea 6:2. And then it was on the third day, this is the Esther Rabbah, that Esther donned royal raiments. And then it says she wore royal raiments of her ancestors' household. By what merit? By the merit of the third day on which the Torah was given. And then Rabbi Levi said, it was due to the merit of the third day of Abraham, our patriarch. On the third day, he's quoting obviously the Torah, on the third day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place. And the rabbi asks, what did he see? He saw a cloud attached to the mountain, and he said, it appears that this is the place where the Holy One, blessed be he, told me to sacrifice my son. And that's actually from a different text, from the Bereshit Rabbah 56:1 for anyone who's interested. But it's cool. I like it a lot because this third day motif comes in here when Israel is threatened with death, and then it's immediately linked to the kind of hope that's invested in the third day for resurrection, and then also linked through Abraham's seeing on the third day the place where he'll sacrifice his son. It's always linked to crucifixion, to sacrifice at the very least. Okay, on the third day, when Esther ended her prayer, it's a long prayer, she took off the garments in which she had worshipped and clothed herself in splendid attire. Then, majestically adorned, after invoking the aid of the all-seeing God and Savior, she took her 2 maids with her, leaning daintily on one, while the other followed, carrying her train. She was radiant with perfect beauty, and she looked happy, as if beloved, but her heart was frozen with fear. When she had gone through all the doors, she stood before the king. He was seated on his royal throne, clothed in the full array of his majesty, all covered with gold and precious stones, and he was most terrifying. Lifting his face, flushed with splendor, he looked at her in fierce anger. And the queen faltered, and turned pale and faint, and collapsed upon the head of the maid who went before her. Then God changed the spirit of the king to gentleness, and in alarm he sprang from his throne and took her in his arms until she came to herself. And he comforted her with soothing words and said to her, "What is it, Esther? I am your brother. take courage, you shall not die, for our law applies only to the people. Come near. Then he raised the golden scepter and touched it to her neck, and he embraced her and said, Speak to me. And she said to him, I saw you, my lord, like an angel of God, and my heart was shaken with fear at your glory, for you are wonderful, my lord, and your countenance is full of grace. But as she was speaking, she fell fainting, and the king was agitated, and all his servants sought to comfort her. And the king said to her, What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given you, even to half of my kingdom. And then Esther, somewhat famously, invites Haman and the king to dinner. And says at the end, My petition and request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the dinner which I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said. Yeah, I love it.
Should we keep reading? Or, that's fine.
Yeah, let's stop there. So, it's great. I think what's great about it is in some ways that I think this was what had always thought was like the lamest part of it. And so it's for me personally, sorry guys out there, if this isn't your experience, but it just has a kind of, I used to think this was so lame and now it's so cool. Mm-hmm. And I think the lame part about it is like fainting women as a thing is sort of, I don't know. It seemed like in the Victorian era, women fainted a lot more. And I haven't seen a lot of fainting, like in my experience, but we're Americans, so I don't think we would do a lot of that. But, yeah, but like trying to understand it was hard for me. But I think,
well, it doesn't seem, like that exciting. Like,
sure.
Like here you have like the heroine entering, she's about to do this dramatic thing. She's going to confront the king, and instead of confronting the king, she faints.
Yeah.
Something that's interesting, which you reminded us to pay attention to, is Esther prays in her prayer specifically, put eloquent speech in my mouth before the lion. And so you as a reader have this expectation that she is going to go before the king with the strength of the Lord and give this eloquent speech that's going to win his heart. But then instead what she does is she falls on the maid.
She chokes.
And she almost like you can almost read it as her choking on her own words when she does finally speak. It just sounds like a very frightened woman. In a certain sense, you're like, well, what's going on here? Is she like, did the Lord just abandon her in this moment?
Yeah, and also think she ends her prayer by saying, save me from my fear. And then she's overcome with fear, and she says it. Yeah.
Is this like just a story of like, well, I guess kind of going to like the superficial reading, is this just a story where like the prettiest woman faints and then gets what she wants? I think that's the superficial reading of Esther. But I think especially seeing how this prayer leads up to this moment, it seems that the Lord answers her by allowing the fainting to happen, by allowing her to be like overcome in her fear, because that's actually what speaks most eloquently to the king. Mm-hmm. That's what converts and changes his heart. Is the way that she reacts in front of him. Yeah,
and the imagery making the king out to be a god gets so intense here. So you don't even need, I mean, previously maybe I relied a little on the rabbinic tradition, sort of interpreting all this as idolatry, but here she's described as going through multiple doors towards this interior, and when she gets to the king, it's this totally inhuman description. He's actually covered with gold and precious stones. And that's exactly the description of, a god in its temple as being dazzling, because it's similar to like the made up girl of the harem, where it's like you're dazzling because of what you've put on, right? Mm-hmm. But the reaction to it though is that this really is really like it's not just like Esther says, oh, well, I know he's not really a god. He's a man, so I'm not scared. It's like that underestimates what human beings are capable of. Like we really can produce the appearance of divinity, and you're not free from that just by like knowing something about it.
Yeah.
Like she is in the regime, she is in the harem, she has been habituated to it for years now, and she is breaking the law. And then when she finally gets into that inner court and he is dazzling like the sun, it's not, I don't read it as like her faking it or something. I think it really is the appearance of divinity achieved by man. She's looking at it. And that's the great battle that she's been prepared for. Like she has been prepared to take the law of God into this room and face a God. And that's, I think, why in her prayer she calls him the King of the gods, when she's praising the Lord, is that she goes to that motif that you'll see throughout the scriptures where God isn't, like on the one hand, they deny the existence of other gods. On the other hand, they describe him as like the destroyer of all other gods because,
the God of other gods.
And so I think if you go back to that beginning where Esther's prefigured as this little spring of water. If you go back to her prayer where she calls herself lowly, and her history where she's an orphan who's taken in by an uncle, and again back to her prayer and realize that what she's asking for is for the to save Israel from a future in which they are magnifying forever a mortal king. Like this man is going to be forever magnified if the resistance to idolatry in the world, which is Israel, is destroyed. And she's embodying Israel in that moment. And I think the paradox that you point to is that it's weakness that wins against, really, it seems like her expectation. Certainly it seems like against Mordecai's expectation, that the thing that kills the God on that throne is a display of her own weakness that then he responds to by running to help her. And I think actually the whole mystery of man and woman and their political relation is sort of here, but it's hard to tease out. I think we are familiar with and sympathetic because we have maybe the words of Scripture in our ear that in weakness I am strong. And then we have the Magnificat, this declaration that God is the one who lifts up the lowly.
Right. Yeah. I think that's worth teasing out a bit more because I do think that's one of the themes of Esther, and I think it's really easy to misunderstand what's going on. This idea of like woman's strength comes in weakness. Yeah,
it's not immediately flattering, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good way to go at it, but I think one of the things that we were talking about earlier and preparing that was helpful is seeing the way in which Esther, by kind of appearing with like a raw honesty of herself and her own like frailty before the king who holds like her life in his hands, she reveals the truth about who she is and also of her husband. This is the first time that we ever see the king not acting through bureaucracy. This is the first time that he's being his own agent, and that's something that her display of vulnerability calls forth in him. Yeah. And I think it's really important not to underestimate that kind of power. Like there's a certain kind of power that's obvious because like it's external, like it makes demands and then you follow them. But there's another kind of power, maybe you could think of it like manipulation. Like in a way she is manipulating the king, and you don't have to think about it in a cynical way. But she is actually like commanding power over him, not by forcing him to do something, but really calling deeply to his interior and to his identity and as her husband. And this is the first time that you actually see him acting in that capacity. Totally.
Yeah, and the image is marvelous because when she faints onto one of the maids that have been assigned to her, and then the king actually replaces the maid. So it's sort of subtle, but she says she collapses onto her maid who went before her, and then he comes, he springs from his throne, and he takes her in his arms, right? So he's even not only entering the position of servant, like literally a girl, actually, but also he is replacing a part of the bureaucratic system here. Like those maids are assigned to her by the eunuchs. This is all part of the whole pagan regime. So he undoes in two senses in the same motion. He replaces a sort of part of the machine with an actual personal act, and then he also lowers himself immensely, which is what Esther
Right.
prayed for, that he would lower himself. And
But yeah, it's just like nothing else could elicit that kind of response. Like if she had come in with a mindset of I'm just going to confront him, that would have been way less effective, because then she just would have been another fighter on the field that he would have to take down, like Vashti.
Like Vashti, yeah. So she does something radically different just by showing up. And I think, again, a superficial view could kind of miss the immense conversion of worldviews that's happening here, and say like, oh yeah, she evokes pity in the king. Like she looks, you know how it is when women look sad and you feel bad about it and you go to help them. But I think that, first of all, in a sort of empire that's designed in order to resist this moment from happening, that's why this is such a dramatic climax here. That the king is always supposed to be on that throne. The whole thing exists for him to be on that throne. And then a woman comes in and gets him off. The other thing is that this it's also tempting to say, well, what we're seeing here is like the power of the king failing. Like power is this bad thing. And then in the story of Esther, power sort of overshoots the mark and has to humiliate itself. That's the story of Esther. Now, there's some of that with Haman, I think. But with the king, I don't think that's what it is. Because remember who the king is. I mean, he is, for the sake of the production of this powerful, godlike thing, he is without his own agency. I mean, he's without his humanity. He has all this power, but what is it for? I mean,
he's constantly acting through other people,
through other mediators.
He's not actually acting through his own agency. He's constantly checking the advice of other people. How do I interpret the law?
Yeah.
What is the correct way to jump through all these bureaucratic hoops in this system?
Yeah, he's a servant. I mean, he is a servant of the system. He just doesn't know it. And then in the woman, by allowing him to serve her, actually frees him from being a servant to sin, or a servant to this
Regime.
whole regime. And I think, though, there's this experience guys have where it's like what I want to point out is that this is true to the nature of power. This isn't like something else against power. It's like actually the way power works is that you have capacity. That's what power means. You can do things. And then it's fulfilled in weakness, because weakness calls upon power to its aid, right? And that can be internal to you in the sense of like, I have this great power for X and I need Y, and therefore I use my power and achieve an end, and that's satisfying and natural and good, right? But it's also like, a parent with his child. You have all of these capacities in your life, and they don't even necessarily receive any kind of perfection or make any kind of sense until you have weakness appear in your life that needs all of your powers, orients them all towards itself. And then it's sacrificial and it hurts, but you grow in power precisely because there's weakness that calls upon you at the same time. Which is in some ways just to say that the thing that God created in the beginning was not a man. It was man and woman. The thing God created in the beginning was not an individual. It was a family, the man and the woman, and so their powers are correlated, and they only receive their perfection by being given. The other is integral to the self, and I think all of that is, in this like brief image, it's just a couple of lines, is revealed here.
I think there's a couple other things I want to say about weakness being power. And I think I want to emphasize is that that's actually true and is not just a trite thing to say.
Yeah.
And one is that like this is the way that the Lord prefers to operate. Like human beings are most powerful when we admit that we are weak before the Lord and choose to be instruments. And so seeing a woman act in this way isn't something trite. Like Esther is the most powerful servant of God in this narrative because she's choosing to humble herself before the Lord. And I think it's made just extremely explicit through her. Maybe that is all I wanted to say.
Well, yeah, but she also like wrenches the king out of this whole fake eunuch world.
Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden he's a man.
I guess that's the second thing I wanted to say is like the power that she has is real. Like, again, it's not just a trite thing to say. Like, what else could elicit this kind of response? And if you want to deny that that's real power, I think that's just an illusion. I think it's helpful to see like the ability to call forth conversion in another person, even though I'm not demanding that does have a powerful effect on the world. And it can even be, I think, more powerful than just an exterior command because it has the capacity to change the human heart.
Yeah.
Instead of just the exterior. Like I don't think that, again, if she had come in with this eloquent speech preparing to confront the king, that she would have been actually successful. Maybe she could have forced his hand into a situation where he would have to choose between two embarrassing situations, and so he would choose the less embarrassing situation. But in this case, like his heart actually converts on behalf of his wife.
Yeah.
And it makes him like a more like powerful agent in her plans.
Yeah, and now they're a unity, and I think this is symbolized in the dinner. So it's symbolized, it's basically said when he says to her, "I am a brother to you." So it's gone from harem, chief concubine, to family. Like somehow the kind of, again, I think of it as this like, hidden secret of the Lord carried within the woman, entering into the pagan regime and machine that would magnify a mortal king, and then the conversion is affected by a feminine display of weakness calling upon masculine strength unto itself. And at that moment, the word spoken is brother. The word spoken is kinship related. It's like, now we're part of the same thing together. And they move on through life now as a unit. I think that's what signified. And she doesn't just say, Haman's going to kill us, kill him first. She says, come to dinner. And she says, I'm going to make you dinner. And she's plotting. There's a Jewish phrase that I read in Esther Rabbah that says, a woman spins as she speaks. Like just always getting something done. So I'm not trying to deny that there's like plotting here, but it is a dinner. It is a feast that she now has authority, like her own authority, still under the king. I mean, there's no doubt about it, but she is now preparing the meal. Like if this whole thing began at a banquet, but now it's the queen who's calling her banquet, and he's attending, and she's cooking, which is just delightful. Actually, I'm just thinking about what Esther made. I bet it was great.
Yeah, well, she's like calling him out of the throne room into a place where she can speak with her real relationship with him, because up until this point, she really hasn't been able to act as wife, to presume that her husband's concerns are her concerns.
Totally.
But this is the first time that he's actually called upon as husband, which she wasn't allowed to do.
Right.
Like she couldn't just say, oh no, this terrible thing is happening. Honey, could you please come here? I need to talk to you about something.
Yeah.
That wasn't an option.
That was the risk of death.
Another thing before we move on to, because I think sometimes like we can associate like weakness with being like pathetic. I think maybe vulnerability is a better word to associate the way we're talking about weakness, because she's not walking into a situation and looking pathetic and demanding his pity because she's just being like this like irrational, freakish woman who's now just like weeping because she's just scared irrationally about things. Like she's appearing in vulnerability because she could actually die. And so he knows that what she's doing is something brave. He's not looking at her like, oh, this is pathetic, and I need to like fix this little problem.
Yeah.
Like calm down.
Yeah.
She's actually sacrificing herself and putting something on the line. And I think that is really significant, is that salvation of her people still comes at a cost to her. It's not just her being pretty that wins the day. It's her like actually risking her life, because this story could have ended in a different manner. He would have every reason to also put her away. And I think that's important for thinking about the vocation of women, especially like thinking about like when you're in a pagan society, or when you're in a place that needs reform, needs conversion, where the tyrant needs to topple down. Like the role isn't just like to look pathetic, but to actually think about like, what is my cross in this situation? What is the sacrifice that I'm being called to make? She doesn't come forward pretending to be like invulnerable. She comes forward vulnerable and notably making a great sacrifice of herself. And that's what earns the king's love rather than just pity.
Yeah. And he says to her, speak to me, and denies his divine status. She says, like an angel of God. He says, just a brother. And if you recall that fear at the beginning of Esther, that what happens in the kingdom at this centralized location of power kind of affects the whole. And then the claim at the beginning was that, well, Vashti has to go away because every man should be in his house able to simply speak his own language. So the idea of unity between husband and wife was a threat to the integrity of the whole state, because that would produce alternative nodes of power and authority. Instead, what you need is this like unmediated or rule, basically just straight rule without speech, without dialogue, without conversation. And now it's great because, like, right at the center of the same place, within this sort of inner sanctum, what's being done is speech. So he's saying, "Speak to me," and then as the narrative progresses, what we're going to see is this actually does become paradoxically the characteristic of the kingdom. That peace spreads as it was predicted to in the beginning. That the spring will become like a great ocean that will cover the world. So I guess maybe we could read a little further and then call it. We're not going to quite end. We're not going to quite read the whole thing.
Yep.
Constrained, I imagine, by some minutes here.
Yeah, we'll read the main bit of the story and then skip to the end.
Okay, go ahead.
Where are we at? Haman plans.
I think we just start at 6. I mean the.
I think this little bit.
Oh yeah,
is important. So, and Haman went out that day joyful and glad of heart. So he's just been invited to a dinner. So he's thrilled. But then he sees Mordecai in the king's gate. And Mordecai neither rose nor trembled before him, and he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. He sent and fetched his friends and his wife Zeresh. And Haman recounted to them the splendor of his riches, the number of his sons, and all the promotions which the king had honored him, and how he had advanced above the princes and the servants of the king. And Haman added, "Even Queen Esther let no one come with the king to the banquet she prepared but myself. And tomorrow also I am invited by her together with the king. Yet all this does me no good, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate." Then his wife Zeresh and all of his friends said to him, "Let a gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. Then go merrily with the king to the dinner." This counsel pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made.
There's a great story from the Esther Rabbah where all of the trees volunteer to be the gallows for Haman, but the one to whom it is set aside is the thorn, which I think is just really cool because it's like the thorn, the suffering, which is for Mordecai, then reverses itself and becomes for Haman. Well,
yeah, it doesn't.
spoilers.
The trees know. The trees know what's up. The trees know
Yes.
the divine plan that it's intended for Mordecai, but then it will be for Haman.
Mm-hmm.
So they're very excited.
Mm-hmm.
Should I keep reading?
Yeah, sure.
So on that night, the king could not sleep, and he gave orders to bring the book of memorable deeds, the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written how Mordecai had told about Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, who guarded the threshold, and who had sought to lay hands upon King Ahasuerus. And the king said, "What honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this?" The king's servants who attended him said, "Nothing has been done for him." And the king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to speak to the king about having Mordecai hanged on the gallows that he had prepared for him. So the king's servants told him, "Haman is there, standing in the court." And the king said, "Let him come in." So Haman came in, and the king said to him, "What shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor?" And Haman said to himself, "Whom would the king delight to honor more than me?" And Haman said to the king, "For the man whom the king delights to honor, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse which the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal crown is set, and let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble princes. Let him clothe the man whom the king delights to honor, and let him conduct the man on horseback through the open square of the city, proclaiming before him, 'Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor.'" Then the king said to Haman, "Make haste, take the robes and the horse, as you have said, and do so to Mordecai the Jew, who sits out at the king's gate. Leave out nothing that you have mentioned." So Haman took the robes and the horse, and he clothed Mordecai, and made him ride through the open square of the city, proclaiming, "Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor." Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate. But Haman hurried to his house, mourning, with his head covered. And Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of the Jewish people, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him."
Yeah, and that prediction is great. It's very similar in the book of Judith. I think it's Asher. No, that's not his name. The pagan king in that case asks, like, can we beat these people?
Yeah.
And what he says basically, like, look,
If God's on their
Israelites
team.
are odd. If they've sinned, you can beat them. If they haven't sinned, or if God's with them, then they are unbeatable. And that's his sort of answer. And so this is sort of I think a similar thing. He's just burning up. So, I can't imagine the humiliation. Your sworn enemy getting all the honor you wanted as you walk around, proclaiming that the king delights in him.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of an interesting bit in the story. Like, it's not really necessary for what happens, but it does heighten all of the tension.
Yeah.
And it is this comedic reversal. And it's like kind of a prophetic moment, speaking of Haman's downfall before it happens.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I mean, if you think about the Magnificat, it's not just that the lowly are lifted up, it's that the mighty are laid low. There really is this reversal. And I think that's the drama of salvation, that it comes within the world of sin. And so it's not simply that it's always true to some extent that we are weak in comparison to God, and that by his grace he lifts us up. But in the context of rebellion, he lifts us up and he humbles whatever's haughty, whatever's proud before him.
Right.
Go ahead.
I think it's really fascinating how subtle the hand of God is. I think one of the questions of this whole story is a question about how does providence actually work? And like there's explicit prayers to God, but you don't really actively see God as an agent in this story. Like providence is just working behind the scenes in very subtle ways. So as Haman is on his way to destroy Mordecai, God steps in by disturbing the king's sleep. Like something so simple. He can't fall asleep. And so he asks for the records to be read to him. And that ends up being what saves Mordecai, but then also humiliates Haman. And even going back to Esther's prayer for eloquence, like God allows her to stumble and fall. And like you see the hand of providence working in this incredible way through this story, but just not in the way that you would expect. And the way that God actually moves seems to be extremely subtle.
Well, subtle, like in terms of small gestures, but like really funny at the same time. I mean this.
It kind of feels like God was just like puts a banana peel right in front of Haman and then takes his hand back just to watch him fall.
There's this way that the Christian tradition takes up not Purim, but through Mary, who is the fulfillment of everything in Esther here, in this tradition the church had, especially in the Middle Ages, of a great reversal or a great turning upside down of the world that happened at what gets called now the Feast of Fools, but which usually was the Feast of the Circumcision of Christ, or sometimes the Feast of St. Nicholas. Sometimes it happened in different places in different parts of the church, but it always had this great turning upside down. So like the boy would become the bishop for a couple of days, and the subdeacons of a cathedral, who were like the lowest of the clergy, would take charge of the liturgy like they were the highest of the clergy, and things would get turned upside down. And we labored under a lot of dumb interpretation of that, where people thought like, oh, it's because they're all cooped up praying all day and they need something wild to get it all out of their system. We don't historically say that sort of thing anymore. That was like an Enlightenment trope. Now we look at that and realize that that's in Christianity. They would inaugurate the Feast of Fools during evening prayer, during the Magnificat, when it gets to that line, and lifted up the lowly, or that brought the mighty down from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. The choir singing the Magnificat would usually repeat that. This is especially in France and England for anyone who's interested. But they would repeat that line like 3 or 4 times. Sometimes there's even bans on repeating it too many times. Like you can only repeat that part 5 times, because that was what was being shown there. Was that like, how do we know God's presence? It's hard for us in a world of sin, but one of the ways we see it is when small things that do not have power are so obviously triumphant that we have to ascribe the entirety of the act not to its apparent cause, which is a woman in this case, but to God. And that's the other side of the strength of weakness. And you said it, which is that it is what God likes to work through, and it is because it's openness to help, right? But it's also like the most mighty display of his reality, because it's like you can't ascribe. I mean, maybe if a great strong man achieves the thing, then you have this possibility of saying, "Oh, there's a work of man. How marvelous man is." But when victory is achieved at the hand of a woman, or when victory is achieved by by someone stumbling and fainting, when victory is achieved by that which is smallest, then we are, I think, most prepared to say, oh, there's like greatness has stepped in here. Like there's something unseen. You affirm the invisible reality of the divine helper. Obviously, that's like a sort of fulfillment in Mary, but I think that is a part of the Christian tradition as well. That's like, yeah. Anyways.
We should probably wrap this up and then end with concluding thoughts.
That's
given
fair. Let's do
the
it.
time constraint.
So she saves the day, right?
Should we read? Oh yeah, we've got to read chapter 7. I think that'll kind of get us there.
And while they were yet talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived, and they brought Haman in haste to the banquet that Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman went in to feast with Queen Esther. And on the second day, as they were drinking wine, the king again said to Esther, "What is your petition, Queen Esther?" And then it sort of repeats itself, so I'll just go ahead and skip. She says, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to be annihilated. If we had been sold merely as slaves, men and women, I would have held my peace, for our affliction is not to be compared with the loss to the king." Then the king said to Queen Esther, "Who is he, and where is he, that he would presume to do this?" And Esther said, "A foe and enemy, this wicked Haman." And Haman was in terror before the king and queen. And the king rose from the feast in wrath and went into the palace garden. But Haman stayed to beg his life from Queen Esther, for he saw that evil was determined against him by the king. And the king returned from the palace garden to the place where they were drinking wine, as Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. And the king said, "Will he even assault the queen in my presence in my own house?" As the words left the mouth of the king, they covered Haman's face. Then said Harbona, one of the eunuchs in attendance on the king, "Moreover, the gallows which Haman has prepared for Mordecai, whose word saved the king, is standing in Haman's house, 50 cubits high." And the king said, "Hang him on that." So they hanged Haman on the gallows which he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the anger of the king abated.
And this is the
And
part
on that
we can-
day, the king gave to Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was to her. And the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman.
Do you mind if I skip to chapter 10?
Yeah,
and end with
please.
that? So what we're skipping through is the king's letter that goes kind of reversing, not exactly reversing the decision, but cleverly saying, well, if you're going to attack the Jews have every right to attack you and take all of your stuff. Mm-hmm. And so everyone out of fear does not do those things. And also the Jews are given permission to attack their enemies instead. Mm-hmm. And so the descendants of Agag are officially wiped out. And then at the end, Mordecai returns to the dream. So he remembers the dream. He says, "These things have come from God, for I remember the dream that I had concerning these matters, and none of them has failed to be fulfilled. The tiny spring, which has become a river, and there is light and the sun and abundant water, the river is Esther, whom the king married and made queen. The 2 dragons are Haman and myself. The nations are those that gather to destroy the name of the Jews. And my nation, this is Israel, who cried out to God and were saved. The Lord has saved his people. The Lord has delivered us from all these evils. God has done great signs and wonders, which have not occurred among the nations. For this purpose he made 2 lots, one for the people of God and one for all the nations. And these 2 lots came to the hour and moment and day of decision before God and among all the nations. And God remembered his people and vindicated his inheritance. So they will observe these days in the month of Adar, on the 14th and 15th of that month, with an assembly and joy and gladness before God, from generation to generation, forever among his people Israel." The end.
The end. That's great.
So sad that we had to skip through some of that to get to the end, but I think it's worth leaving some time for concluding thoughts, especially if we're focusing more on Esther rather than on the character of Mordecai.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say this. The king hands his ring over, and he also has that letter that he sends. He gives evidence of a sort of conversion to the God of Israel. So
right.
There's a part where it says, the peoples of the country declared themselves Jews, for the fear of the Jews had fallen upon them. So there's a certain fulfillment of their purpose, which is to be a light to the nations here. But it's also the case that the king in his letter for the first time shows humility. But then you have to remember that the letter is actually being written by Esther. So he tells her that you may write as you please with regard to the Jews in the name of the king and seal it with the king's ring, for an edict written in the name of the king and sealed with the king's ring cannot be revoked. And then, so that's in the Hebrew, and then the letter that follows as a result, it's funny because it's Esther,
right?
And she's being so lovely to the king because she's making this excuse for him, and blaming Haman for everything.
Yeah. He doesn't actually technically ever reverse his edict, so he's never publicly embarrassed. But he's kind of acknowledged as a part of the divine plan. It's like, for God, who rules over all things, has made this day to be a joy to his chosen people instead of a day of destruction for them.
Yeah.
So he's kind of like a bringer of divine news.
Yeah, but also not a god himself. Like there's this monotheistic acknowledgement that there is a God, a living God, who's directed the kingdom for us. So he actually, through Esther, steps back from the whole thing, the whole project of paganism, the whole appearance of paganism. And I think that would be like really, really what I would want to conclude with is that for the first time, the king and the queen are really married, and it's not. It's a fulfillment of what the plan was from the beginning for man and woman, which is to, in being married to each other, like in loving each other, rejoicing in the fact that they are not God, and in finding in each other the constant nourishment of that call to rejoice in your own being created and your own being a creature, which is a drama and a difficulty for us. It's not just a given. It's like something that means that we look at our lack in the face and then we dare to say yes to it. We say how good it is that we are not more than what we are. It's such a paradox. But it's marriage that really, really achieves that. And the whole story of Esther seems to me this victory ultimately after much suffering of marriage over idolatry. And I think that is what, if we were going to say, okay, what can men and women sort of take from Esther today? I think it would be that. It would be that you, in your sex, in your sexual nature, have a vocation to oppose tyranny, which is always a form of idolatry, even if it's secular and political. Like the nature of your own incompleteness and your insufficiency means that you are a point of resistance to any claims to divinity in the world, however they purport to exist, like whatever they say about themselves, like whether it's the quasi divinity of the nation state, or if it's the divinity of the technocratic dream of a disembodied humanity. Like sex is always the thing that resists it, because it's always the thing that we like about ourselves in the other, and enjoy, and know that it means we're not more than we are, that we're not God.
Yeah, I think a couple things that I have been taking away from Esther this time is the point that you were making of like, in weakness, I am strong, not in the sense of like pathetic, but in the sense of being honest about your vulnerability entails like a real like sacrifice of possibly being like crushed by the other, but it's in taking that risk that you're actually capable of like calling the other person into reality, which in this case and like very often involves the other person rising to the occasion of actually being humble and a servant. And I think in this story you see that like that risk is worthwhile, even though like it could have ended very badly. I am still thinking a lot about the difference between Vashti and Esther, because I don't think that Vashti is set up as like the bad queen and Esther is the good queen. She's kind of a victim within circumstances. And so in the situation where you do have like like a tyrant king, or you have this like appearance of divinity, I don't think that Vashti is being written as being a bad person, but in order to overcome this system, it involves like a real sacrifice and a real risk. And it seems like Vashti doesn't actually stick out her neck enough in order for the system to come toppling down. She's still willing to operate within it out of fear, still like communicating to her husband, not his husband, but through distance. And to do otherwise would be to risk her life. But I think the story shows that just because you are like a victim in this case doesn't mean that like you'll be safe, and that ends up being her downfall. Whereas I think Esther realizes the deep risk of the situation, and she's kind of in a situation like Vashti. If she just tries to play the system to her advantage, she's going to go down either way. So I think that's kind of a helpful way of reading it without looking at like Vashti as this like enemy character or anti like woman character. Like she has the capacity to step in as a heroine, but doesn't. Probably like in part because she doesn't have a relationship with God and with the law, which has like a clear path of how to respond with heroism to the call of God. And I think the story also, I guess I already touched on it, but the idea of like there is no salvation without the cross. There is no salvation without real risk and dying to self, which Esther embodies. And so I think that can be a helpful thing to think about personally. Like, am I like seeking to like fix some situation, or do I feel called to like step in to like, I don't know, like be like a hero in this situation like she's being called to, but am I avoiding the real risk? Am I avoiding like the cross or humility before God? Yeah.
Marvelous. All right. Well, we hope that you enjoyed reading Esther with us. Again, we are quite delighted and excited to have a conference on some of these themes and some of these insights on the mystery of man and woman, and we hope that you will come on out. Also, we have a magazine issue that's devoted to man and woman, the sort of theological significance of man and woman, the metaphysical place of sexual difference. There's just some marvelous stuff in it. And it should be available right now at newpolity.com/magazine. So you can kind of journey with us further. And then this podcast, my intention is to continue and discuss about other Old Testament matriarchs, Old Testament heroes, and try to come to some kind of conclusion about what the Bible is telling us about man and woman in New Polity fashion, I suppose. So I wish I could do that all with you, Maria, but of course you have a whole life out there, biblical theology, Notre Dame, crushing it. So thank you for this time. It was really awesome. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
You got it. All right, everyone. Enjoy. God bless, and goodbye.